Hi, welcome to part 3 in our 3-part cabinet building series. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make drawer faces, as well as install drawer faces, both for inset applications as well as overmount applications. I'm also going to show you how to make cabinet doors, which, let's be honest, are just bigger drawer faces. So, watch the video if you haven't checked out part 1 and 2, where I show carcass construction and face frame installation, as well as drawer slide installation and drawer box construction. Well, you might want to check those out first, or watch this one and then go back and watch those. The most important thing is subscribe down there before you do anything. Okay, play the music!
White snow, red sky, reach out for so high, blue eyes.
So, you want to make some drawer faces, do ya? Well, it's a good thing you're watching this video, because that's what it's about, silly. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get all your measurements to figure out exactly what size drawer faces you need to make. As I mentioned in the last couple of videos, I set up the left side of this cabinet to have overmount drawer faces, and the right side I set up to have inset drawer faces. So I'm going to show you how to do both types. The style drawer faces we'll be learning today is a standard shaker style drawer face. Now, shaker style is by far the most popular style for drawer faces and cabinet doors on the market today. I couldn't show you how to do every style, so naturally I just went with the most popular. Hope it helps. This is basically what the drawer face will look like. You have two styles, or these two long pieces on the side, and two rails. Those are the two pieces on the inside. And each rail gets a small tenon that extends into the style and holds everything together. If you ever have trouble remembering which ones are the rails and which ones are the styles, this is how I like to remember. You got your styles on the outside, like Ryan Stiles, who I assume is a pretty stand-up guy. So they're standing up on the outside. And then you got your rails. Now, they're like rails on a train track. Trains can't drive straight up, so they can't be those ones on the outside. They gotta be those ones going nice and level on the inside. Rails, styles. There you go. Phew, glad we got that behind us. Now that we know the general layout of our drawer faces, we have to cut up a bunch of stock that we can mill down to, well, construct our drawer face, obviously. So first I just run everything through the joiner to get a nice straight edge before I take it over to the table saw. Now, when it comes to the width of your rails and styles, you can really do them any width you want. I'm sure there's a standardized size out there that's traditional, but I don't know it, so don't ask me. But for these specific drawer faces, I'm cutting all my pieces down to 2 1/4 inch. I should also note that these drawer faces are being made out of 3/4 inch stock. That's pretty standard when it comes to most cabinet drawer faces as well as doors. Now at this point I've only rough cut my pieces to the correct size, so after I run them through the joiner and the table saw, get them nice and square, I go over to the chop saw and I cut all my pieces to the exact lengths that I need, making sure that I keep track of which pieces are my rails and which pieces are my styles. In fact, to do so, I like to mark all of my pieces with an S or an R. Those are S's and R's, just in case you can't read my handwriting. At this point, I could tell you to walk over to the router table and finish off your rail and style pieces in what some might call the easy way, cutting all your corresponding mortise and tenons and grooves on some fancy bits. But that's not the way I learned how to do it. I learned how to do it the old-fashioned way, the way they did it back in the 1700s, on an industrial table saw. So that's the process I'm going to show you. So, with all of our rail and style pieces cut to the correct length, we are going to insert a dado stack into the table saw to cut a 1/4 inch groove down the center of all of our pieces. This 1/4 inch groove will catch our internal panel, but it will also act as the mortise to catch the tenons that we'll be cutting into our rail pieces. So it's important to note whatever height you set your dado blade to is going to determine the length of your corresponding tenon. For my drawer faces, I typically do a 3/4 inch tenon, which means you need a 3/4 inch deep groove cut down the center of each piece. You also want to keep track of how you're running each piece through the table saw. You'll notice I'm keeping that S or R mark facing outward. This just makes sure that if I didn't get my dado dead in the center of my piece, by keeping that mark on the outside as I assemble the whole drawer face, it just ensures that, well, everything's going to come together nicely in the end. At this point, you should have a 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch deep dado cut down the center of all of your rail and style pieces. Now we can start cutting the tenons on our rail pieces. For this, I like to use a crosscut sled on the table saw. You're going to want to insert a 1-inch dado stack, and then you're going to raise the blade so that it just meets that 1/4 inch dado that you already cut in your pieces. I like to start a little shallow and then slowly work my way up to the correct height. That way I know I don't cut too far too soon. I also like to mark the length of my tenon. In this case, it's going to be 3/4 inch, so I take a 3/4 inch setup block and I mark out exactly where I want to cut my tenon to. I also cut this shallow at first and then slowly creep up to the correct depth. That way I make sure I don't overcut with my first initial pass. Sometimes it's even helpful to just have a extra piece that you can use as a test block to get everything set up perfectly. As you can see with this pass, I was still a little shallow. There's just a little bit left over before I meet that dado. So I need to raise my saw blade up just a little bit. And I'll keep doing this going back and forth until the height is dead on. Now, just like running them through to get that 1/4 inch groove, you want to cut all of your tenons on one side first. And then you can test everything, make sure it's the right length. And then once you have one side cut, then you can switch to the other side. This just keeps everything nice and even and ensures that we don't overcut anything. But once you get your saw dialed in exactly where you want it, you simply run all your pieces through. When it comes to cutting your other side, it's important that you set up your piece like this, with the uncut little tab against the stop first. If you set it up this way and then cut the other side first, once you cut that other side and flip it around, you're going to lose your registration mark and your cuts are going to be off. So just make sure you think about that when you're making your second pass and final cut on your tenon. Then after ensuring that your saw is set correctly, you simply run every piece through again, cutting those nice tenons that will perfectly interlock into the mortises on our style pieces. It should look something, well, like this. You should have two rail pieces with those perfectly cut tenons that are a 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch long, and you should have a style piece on each side with a perfect 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch deep dado. As you can see, our tenons fit nice and snug into our style pieces. You want them to fit snug, but not so snug that you really have to force them and possibly break the thinner edge on your style. You also have to remember that you will be gluing these together, so if they're too tight, once you put that glue in, you are going to expand that dimension a little bit, and it's going to be much harder to get them together if they're too tight. So loose is okay, just not so loose that it's like floppy. Nobody wants floppy. But with all of our rails and stiles cut correctly and test fitted, we can now cut our panels to set inside each drawer face. Now, if you were making cabinet doors, you would make them exactly the same way. The only difference would be that you'd insert a 1/4 inch panel into the center of each piece, and that would create a nice shaker style cabinet door. Because we're doing drawers, I like to use a 1/2 inch panel inside each piece. Now you're probably thinking, wait a second, 1/2 inch panel? You cut a 1/4 inch dado, you dimwit? Well, don't worry, I've got a solution. Just follow along and I'll show you exactly why I like to use a 1/2 inch panel versus a 1/4 inch panel. What the heck, I'll just tell you right now. If you use a 1/4 inch panel in your drawer face, then it's going to sit internally inside your frame, which means when you push it up against your flat drawer box, you're going to have a void behind it where the panel is recessed into the cabinet. By using a 1/2 inch panel, we can actually make it flush on the back and recessed on the front, simply by removing a little bit of material at the bottom of the 1/2 inch panel to create a 1/4 inch groove that can slide perfectly into our dadoed rails and stiles, thus making it look exactly like a shaker style door on the front with a perfectly flush panel on the back side. To accomplish this, we're going to reinsert a dado stack. I like to use just a big old fatty one. This is a 1 inch dado stack. I then apply a sacrificial fence to the fence on my table saw so that I can push the fence all the way over against that dado stack and actually allow the dado to cut into it partially. This way I can hone in the exact distance that I want my dado to cut. Next, I like to take a scrap piece of my panel material. For these doors, we're using MDF because they're paint grade, and MDF paints great. Paint grade, paint great. Ha! That's kind of funny. As you can see with my test cut, it's not quite long enough and just a little bit loose inside my dado. So I need to lower my saw blade just a little bit and adjust my fence over to create a longer tenon. So I keep going back and forth doing this, running my scrap piece through until I have it fitting absolutely perfect, nice and snug within my dadoed groove. It should look, well, just like this. As you can see, the panel is recessed on the front and perfectly flush on the back, which will allow us to seat our drawer faces nice and flat against our drawer boxes. Next, you take your actual pre-cut panels and run them through on all 4 sides. That's right, because, you know, the drawer face has 4 sides, so it kind of makes sense that, well, this would have 4 sides too. And it should look exactly like this. You can see a nice rabbited out groove on the perimeter of our entire piece that will allow us to fit it perfectly inside our pre-cut rails and stiles. Then with all of our panels cut, I like to do a test fit on all of my pieces before I glue them up. The last thing you want is to start to glue them up immediately and realize that something is a little off somewhere and then have to try and make adjustment cuts with everything covered in glue. But because I'm such a fine woodworker, it actually fits. Wow. Once you are happy with the fit of your drawer face pieces, then, well, you just need to glue them all together. Now, I like to liberally glue my tenons into my stile pieces and then add just a few small drops of glue to my actual panel piece just to keep it from moving around inside the frame. Now, I can get away with this because my panels are MDF, so they're stable and are not going to move. If you're using a solid wood panel on the inside, you're probably going to want to do more of a traditional floating panel and forego the glue on the actual panel piece. But with all of our pieces glued, we just add a few little clamps. Now, honestly, if your pieces are cut snug enough, you probably don't even need the clamps. You could just glue them together and let them sit, but I like to throw some clamps on just to be safe. And because this is a video and we have the benefit of movie magic, look at that, my drawer faces are already dry. So I take them out of clamps, and then you want to sand all of your pieces. Now you can do this just with a palm sander, which I was gonna do, and then I remembered, oh yeah, I got this drum sander over here just collecting dust. So I sent all of them through the drum sander and then took them over to the belt sander just to hit all the edges and sand down those tenons very nicely. I should note, however, that you don't want to use the belt sander to try and sand your belt while you're wearing it. I tried that once and it did not end well. But after I use the belt sander, I just go over the entire drawer face again with the palm sander with some 220 grit to make it nice and smooth, and then by hand I hit the inside edge of those recessed panels just to knock it down and make it nice to the touch. And just like that, our drawer faces are complete and ready to be installed onto, well, our drawers, dummy. Let's start with installing the overmount drawer faces first. Now, I created these drawer faces with a 1/2 inch overhang. So the first thing I do is mark a 1/2 inch down and a 1/2 inch over onto my actual face frame. So I know exactly where that drawer face needs to land. Now, if you're going to install overmount drawer faces with any regularity at all, get yourself a pair of these drawer face clamps from Rockler. They're amazing and they will save you so many headaches. They work just like this. There's a right side clamp you hook on, well, the right side, and there's a left side clamp you hook on, gosh, do I have to explain it to you? The left side. And then you insert your drawer face just like this. Position it where you want it to be positioned with that 1/2 inch overhang, and then you just tighten it down. These clamps hold your drawer face firmly in place and then allow you to pull it out and screw it in from the drawer box. But I understand that not everybody has these clamps or doesn't want to spend the money on these clamps to do just a few drawer faces, so here's a couple other ways you can do it. If your face frame allows, you can clamp a piece of temporary wood onto the face of your cabinet. As you can see, I am clamping it a 1/2 inch down because we have a 1/2 inch overhang. Then you simply just set your drawer face onto that piece of wood and screw it in place from inside your drawer. If that doesn't work, you could also map out exactly where your hardware is going to be placed on your drawer face. Then drilling through your drawer face into your drawer box, you can simply attach your hardware on, and that will hold your drawer face in place until you can secure it with screws from the inside. But tell you what, I have these special clamps, so why the heck would I not use them? So that's what I'm going to use to install my drawer faces. I like to install the drawer faces using these 1-inch cabinet screws from GRK. I like that they have this big fatty head on them, which keeps me from accidentally sinking the screw too far through the drawer box and poking it out the front. Nobody wants to do that. If you are interested in these drawer face clamps, I will include a link to them in the video description below. But with our drawer faces clamped securely, I simply open up the drawer and sink 2 screws from inside the cabinet. Now eventually these will get 4 screws. However, I like to do 2 screws at the top to start with. Then after I get everything put together, painted, and I know I'm not going to have to adjust anything, I'll sink the other 2 screws. It's much easier to sink 2 new screws from the bottom if I have to adjust, and then resync the screws on the top if there aren't already 4 holes in the cabinet that the screws are going to want to try and find. And once I get the top one done, I do the bottom one, and booyah! Both of our overmount drawer faces are installed quick and easy. Now let's do the inset drawer faces. Now I've cut my drawer faces to be an 1/8 inch shy of the actual size of my opening. This will allow for a 1/16 of an inch space around the entire drawer face once I get it installed. Now the easiest way to do this is just with a deck of cards. You just count out even amount of cards to go on both sides, as well as the top and the bottom, making sure that you shove enough cards in there that it is nice and snug. You really want it wedged in place. Then once you get all your cards inserted and you have a nice even reveal around the entire thing, you simply reach inside the cabinet box, add some screws, and voila! Remove your cards. Now you can see that my gap on the top is just a little bit bigger than my gap on the bottom. But hey, remember those fancy undermount drawer slides we used? Yeah, this is where they come in real handy, because we can simply open the drawer and using our auto adjust mechanisms built into the drawer slides, we adjust it up a little bit, and look at that, a perfect reveal around the entire perimeter of our inset drawer. If at this point you're thinking, what the heck, I don't remember any drawer slides. Well, it's because you didn't watch part 2 of the cabinet building series, so why don't you quit whining and go back and watch part 2? and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about with those fancy drawer slides. Anyways, after doing the top, we do the exact same thing to the bottom. The only difference is that to get to the bottom drawer, we have to first remove the top drawer, which is also quick and easy because of those fancy drawer slides we used. With the top drawer removed, we can reach inside the cabinet, install a few screws, reinsert the top drawer, and voila, our bottom drawer is installed. This one just happens to be perfect right off the bat, no adjustments needed. That doesn't usually happen, but I'm really glad it happened on camera for you guys. As you can see, I'm going to adjust those auto adjusters all the way over so you can see how well they work. See the big gap on the right and no gap on the left? But we can move the drawer after it's installed because of those fancy drawer slides and reposition it any way we want. This will make inset drawers so much easier for you guys. So if you didn't watch video 2, go back and watch that about installing drawer slides and how easy undermount drawer slides are to actually install. And our cabinet is done and ready for paint. If you were doing a cabinet with cabinet doors, they are built exactly the same way as the drawer faces, except for that 1/4-inch panel, and of course you hook them on with hinges. I'll have to do another video at some point showing cabinet door installation, because it can get a little tricky, but alas, that will have to be for another time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Now, go build some drawer faces. Go install some drawer faces. Build some cabinets. You know what to do. Well, you should at least. And if you haven't done it, click subscribe right down there and hit that little bell. That's gonna keep you notified when I post new videos. Oh, and tell your friends too.